Super Smash Bros. Brawl is too easy of a game, so today I'm gonna make it harder. Here are the rules for this challenge. No jumping, intense difficulty, no pressing A, no pressing Z, and no picking up items. Welcome to the hardest Super Smash Bros. Brawl challenge. I will be attempting to complete the single player story mode of this game called the Subspace Emissary, with all these rules in place of course. And by playing the game this way, it presents us with a lot of unique challenges that aren't present normally. For starters, the platforming sections are a lot more tricky now since I can't jump. This makes it so I pretty well have to rely on the character's up B for gaining any sort of elevation. While it is fine in sections where I can play as Pit for example, but when you get stuck with characters like Link who doesn't gain any air from his up B on the ground, well, let's say we'll have to think of other solutions in these scenarios. But the platforming is only half of the game. The other half is having to fight enemies in order to progress. So to make this part of the game more challenging, I have banned pressing the A button. This literally takes away the majority of all characters' moves. And really the most important moves too. You can't use your quick jabs to start a combo, or even your strong smashes to finish an enemy. I guess you can still grab though. So boom, let's take away the grab by banning the Z button. And what that leaves is a mere 4 moves left for each character. Neutral B, side B, up B, and down B. That's it. And you better hope your character doesn't have a weak move in these slots, or just a move that does no damage at all, because then you're stuck with even less moves to attack your enemies with. And just for good measure, because this isn't difficult enough, we're playing the whole game on intense difficulty. So I'm stuck with these 4 wimpy B moves while having to fight the toughest versions of all of these enemies. And this difficulty is just randomly super hard, even without all my other stupid rules I added. The enemies have more health and hit even harder, just to name a few things that change in this difficulty. So while my moves are basically love taps, the enemy's attacks can do like 70% in one hit and have crazy knockback. And then just random stuff hits you like a truck now. Like this lava literally does 100% when I touch it. So yes, there is a huge penalty for getting hit now. But what about the items? Well, I banned picking them up too because some of them are really good and can be exploited, which would just make this a whole lot easier. However, I just banned picking up items, so if I hit an explosive or accidentally pick up a mushroom because I can't get out of the way, then it's all good. And I am going to be picking up the required items, which are literally only these keys to open certain doors, because without it, I couldn't progress in these areas at all, and it's not like I'm using them to fight enemies. But all other items that are not required, I cannot pick up. So okay, this story mode actually took me a decent amount of time to complete, so I only want to go over the hardest sections with you guys. Basically, the main challenges of this game I can break down into 6 different sections. The platforming, the normal enemies, the boss battles, the subspace levels, the great maze, and finally, the final boss, Taboo. So because there is a lot to cover in this run, I mean my final playtime was 17 hours, geez, I am only going to be talking about the hardest parts in each of these sections, or this will be like an hour-long video. So let's start going through all of these sections here and determine if all of them are possible. And if we check off each section as such, then the whole game is possible, and we can confirm that this run is good. So let's start with the hardest platforming parts. And we really get a taste of what the platforming is gonna be like when we start the first Donkey Kong level. A slightly raised platform. Well, yep, we're screwed. Seriously, Donkey Kong is one of those characters that gains no height from his up B when he is on the ground. I already have to restart this level and use Diddy, who still doesn't have that great of an up B, but it does work for this stage. However, I'll have to keep these kind of characters in mind for later. But then there's the Lucas section at the zoo. Now there's this giant statue chasing me that I can't get away from because of this crate, and he immediately kills me. Yeah, this whole chase section here is super annoying since it's really hard to gain elevation when Lucas is on the ground, and his up B is very slow to use. And literally on intense difficulty, so many times when you touch the statue, you just get plinked around everywhere and die. However, I eventually had to roll behind Pokey, which would still hit me, but at a pretty good angle to avoid most walls, provided I was at somewhat of a low percent. Then I just kept using my up B to make it from platform to platform since I was already elevated. And by doing this, I actually made it to the end of the level with 0 extra lives to spare. The next hard platforming part was the Link and Yoshi stage, where both characters don't gain any height from their up B while grounded. You can see how problems arise when even this simple tree becomes an obstacle that I can't get over, even with Yoshi's down B. However, the one saving grace here is Link's bombs that I use to bomb myself in the air so I can use my up B that will actually give me some elevation. I had to use the same technique later in the level for this giant chasm here, so I literally had to get myself to a super high percentage, but this part I completed using the same technique. Ugh. But then, get a load of this platforming section here. This was actually really tough. We got a bunch of walls coming at you with random holes in them that you have to go through. Okay, so my literal only chance here was to use Pit, as everyone else couldn't make these jumps. But even with Pit himself, it was still a huge challenge because I can't fly forever and had to go between specific gaps. I mean, look how precise I had to be here. The first wall, I will give you that, it was pretty easy, but then I had to fly up to make it through the middle section of the next. Then I had to precisely land on the wall after that as my recovery ran out and I rode it back to the ground. Next, I had to fly under this wall and finally weave upward through the last wall in which my recovery barely ran out after. That was close. But then we skip a few levels in the game and get to the Samus and Pikachu section where there's a bunch of lifts that move super fast that we have to jump between. But just look how lucky I got in this section here. So I tried to make the first lift with Samus up B, which I couldn't even make that. So I thought I was falling to my death at this point, but then I randomly hit this other enemy that launched me to the final lift perfectly and carried me to the final door. So now I was done with what would have been a hard platforming part, just like that. Damn, I should miss jumps more often. But okay, now we have the final difficult platforming section here before we can check this off our list and move on. And this is platforming outside the halberd as Peach and Sheik. Yeah, this part can obviously get a bit precise here, seeing as a lot of these platforms are pretty tiny. Plus there's wind pushing you, and both of these characters have kinda awkward up Bs too. But you know what? It was going good. I was actually making these jumps with at least one of the characters. And then there's this final gap here that was simply too far of a jump to make. Yeah, both Zelda and Sheik couldn't cross this distance, and Peach even had a worse up B than that. So how was I supposed to overcome this impossible jump? Well, I just tried and missed the jump again as Sheik, and for some reason, it just spawned me on the platform that I was trying to jump to. Oh, sweet. So we can now check off all the platforming parts and then move on to the next big obstacle, the regular enemies. Okay, so the first really challenging enemy that I came across here was the flow enemy. And to put it bluntly, I couldn't kill any of these guys in this level here. Their whole thing is that they always regenerate health when you're not attacking them. And with Lucas or Squirtle's moveset, I simply couldn't deal enough damage to them before they got all their health back. I was seriously hitting and chasing these guys around for so long that I didn't even think I can kill them. And then suddenly, they just disappeared. I guess the game thought I sucked so much or felt bad for me. I don't know, but I'll take it. So then let's move on to the sword fighter stage. Everyone loves the Fire Emblem characters, right? But this stage has these big, dumb sword fighting ambulances. These guys gave me so much trouble in this level. First of all their sword attacks are super powerful, and I have to get close to them since I only got swords to use myself. But they can still throw their swords at me from literally anywhere. Plus when I hit them, they don't flinch at all and still get to hit me. Oh, and shielding is absolutely useless here since they instantly break my shield. But after dying from these boys a bunch of times, I actually got lucky for once and this guy just walked off and killed himself. And then I was just able to tornado the other one. And then for this very last one, I just hit on the lower level and up-B'd till he died too. Phew. But then we go back to the Pikachu and Samus level. The hardest part in this stage was this enemy gauntlet part. There's literally these giant shooters that have like 1,000,000 health. And on top of that, there's all these other enemies here. But luckily, I found the literal perfect spot to stand in this section where both turrets couldn't do a thing to me, and I just killed everyone else this way. So then we get back to playing as Squirtle and Lucas and come across possibly the most difficult enemy to deal with in this run. These are called, Gamyagas. Yeah, these names are more annoying enemy names than even Mario enemies. Regardless though, these things have so much health and are an absolute pain to kill. But the worst part is that they don't even flinch unless you hit their head. So as I'm doing my slow ass attacks down here, they can just shoot me with their lasers, flinging me far away. Their lasers can hit so far too, plus you need to take every part of his body out separately, plus if he shoots you off screen he gains his whole body back, plus you literally can't go around these guys because besides them being really tall, their collision box also extends above them. Honestly, for this part, I really just had to get lucky and be launched high enough over their heads and collision box to make it by, because there was no way I can kill one of them with both of them firing at me. But anyways, then we get to this level that is just one big tough enemy ambush. And since this was close to the end of the game, they gave us only the toughest enemies to fight here. Look at these giant guys. They would just trap me in the corner and absolutely mess me up. Plus, my characters that I can use in this part weren't that powerful, so it was hard even damaging these guys. While I could get pretty far in this part, I would always get messed up by these big guys at the end. So how did I overcome these enemies? By not screwing around anymore, charging in head first and taking on these beasts like a man. No, who am I kidding? I ran away and hit on this top cliff up here like a coward, and then they couldn't even reach me. Ha! So I just spammed arrows as Link until they all died. Take that! But okay, there is one more enemy ambush that I have to go over before we check this section off, and it's the toughest one in the game. It's the one where Rob turns against the evil guys, so you just have to fight a big group of enemies. But look at all these stocks I have to take with only 4 lives. Jeez. And these weren't even easy enemies. I had to fight giant chickens, ghosts, these expandy boys, and 2 of these giant arm tanks to finish it off. Okay guys, I was literally stuck in this section for so long. All the enemies before just wore down the limited lives I had, so when I got to the last 2 arm tanks, I wouldn't stand a chance. But really, it was super tricky to hit these guys in their specific weak points on them. And I couldn't even jump over them most of the time, so sometimes they would just trap me at the side of the stage. What the heck? However, in this attempt here, I actually ran into a mega mushroom at the perfect time right before the tank spawned in, and then I just started mashing down B. I literally kept smacking the one on the right without doing any damage, but then the other one spawned and I somehow kept hitting him, so we just died in like 2 seconds. Sweet. Donkey Kong then bit the bullet after that, but no matter because one of these guys is a lot more manageable than 2, so I could just whittle the other one down with Falcon and finish the final gauntlet. And this completes all of the difficult normal enemy sections for this game. So let's move on to the boss battles now, and let's start with Rayquaza, pretty well the first real boss of this run, and a noticeable difficulty spike here. The 2 characters I have to use for this fight are Fox and Diddy, which aren't the strongest picks here, so my first strategy was to just avoid Rayquaza as much as possible and hit him with projectiles. However, this was painfully slow, as on intense difficulty, the bosses take way more hits. And then some of his attacks were pretty well unavoidable without being able to jump. So he'd eventually wear down my stocks before I could wear his health down. But then I found the key to victory in this fight, and that was just to use Fox's up B. I don't know why, but this move just does so much damage to his health bar. And since I have 4 stocks to work with, after spamming this move enough times, Rayquaza was down. Okay, so then we gotta fight this next boss, Gallium or whatever, and this seemingly hard boss is actually a joke. This is because we got Charizard and his Rock Smash move literally just eats right through his health. I don't know why it does so much damage, but yeah, I just want to mention that this boss was super easy. But the one I'm talking about after that is actually really challenging, and it's the boss Duowan. Ugh, these names, what did I tell ya? Basically, this guy is just super powerful and massive. Plus, my character's attacks in this park were pretty weak, making it hard to whittle down his health before he killed me. Literally, it just felt like it was so hard to get any progress in this fight when a lot of his attacks would just be one-hit kills for me. However, I eventually started to use his own attacks against him by luring his missiles right back to him, and that did a ton of damage. And then I figured out the strategy as Peach, where I just kept spamming side Bs that kept me elevated, and it took out a lot of his health that way. So by using these 2 strategies together, this boss was down too. And that just leaves one more really hard boss I want to talk about. Meta Ridley. This guy is just really hard to hit. He's always up in the air, making it difficult to land a move since I can't jump or up smash. Oh yeah, and I only have 2 minutes to defeat this boss or else I die because the building explodes or whatever. The combination of those two things just make this boss a whole lot more tense to fight. Like, it's kind of a hard fight, but just the fact that I can only use my B moves and there's a strict timer makes the fight actually really hard. But then, it was getting down to the wire. I was spamming Thunderbolts with Pikachu when he hit me right off the platform with only 4 seconds left. And he only had a smidge of health too. I was anxiously waiting to respawn at this point, and when I did, there was only 1 second left, so I immediately just clicked B as Rob, and I sniped Ridley with 23 milliseconds left. That's how we do it around here. Less than a quarter of a second left, and this is the last boss we need to defeat before we check off this section. And that moves us on to the subspace levels, our next task over here. So then at the climax of the story, everyone dies, but they only kinda die, so you have to then go through subspace and save everyone. But King DDD saves a few of you, so you have to progress through this subspace platforming gauntlet with only these 3 characters. And it's a challenge alright, because these characters have pretty poor up Bs to work with. And these are the only guys we can use. Like, DDD probably has the best recovery out of the 3 of them, but even though you go pretty high with his recovery, it's still hard to be precise with it. Like, I swear this first glowy staircase over here, I couldn't even land on the stairs. I would just barely slip through the cracks here, and I really couldn't even stop because the stairs would disappear after a while too. And everyone else's recovery, except DDD, was just too slow. I eventually said screw it and just had to get this goldfish here to slap me at the right angle to fly over this whole section, and that actually seemed to work, so we can move on. But then in the next part, there's these falling platforms and this wall. And you have to break this wall in order to progress, but you can't stand next to it because of these falling platforms. And once I stand on them, then they literally become a death trap because all of my recoveries are too slow to start up, so I just sink. I tried to carve a path in the wall by throwing these Waddle Doos at it, and it was slow, but actually eventually started to work. However, even with that, my recoveries were just too clunky to maneuver through all these small falling platforms. Honestly, I didn't think this method was gonna work. It was just simply too imprecise and inconsistent. Plus, these stupid puppets didn't make anything any easier. But then I thought, if I can't go through the wall, then why not go above it? And you know what? It was actually completely doable this way. I could actually do this whole platforming part with just 2 of DDD's up Bs, so I'll definitely take that one. But that was really close. Then there was only 1 more staircase left that I also cleared with DDD, and it was time to face Bowser. I could only be DDD in this part, and while it was simple to get percentage on him, killing him was pretty tricky since DDD really doesn't have any powerful B moves other than like down B, but that took too long to start up, so Bowser would always shield that. Luckily, by some stroke of fate or whatever, while Bowser was just sitting there using a fire flower, a bomb spawned directly on him, which allowed me to steal the kill. But oh no, we are not done with the subspace platforming just yet. Now there's another platforming section where you can only play as Kirby this time. There is a few tricky enemy ambushes we gotta deal with here, the first of which comprised of these ambulance enemies again, but what made it tricky was having the ambulance cover the ground, and then this shooter guy is always harassing me with bullets in the air. This gave me no time to breathe. And yes, if the ambulance hits me, it's pretty well death. However, I was able to find the perfect sweet spot on this platform here that allowed me to just spam up Bs while not getting hit. And then the last part of this subspace area was this kinda tricky platforming part where I had to move fast before these stairs went away, but I did make it in the nick of time, allowing me to finally check off this section on the list and move on to the Great Maze. And this gigantic Great Maze level was honestly not that bad for this run. I mean, don't get me wrong, this level still sucks in general, right? But not much more than in a normal run. I mean, these are just reused areas from the main game, so we know the platforming is all possible. And then you literally get a checkpoint after going through any door. So while I died a lot here, I could always respawn and get all my lives back. So we're good, right? Everything is great. It's smooth sailing from here on out. Let's get through this maze, defeat the final boss, and complete the challenge already. Not so fast there, because there is still one more aspect here that made the rest of this run a whole lot harder. And this caused me to have to face a lot more challenges in the end of this run. So right before the Great Maze in the subspace part, for some story reasons, all your characters die, meaning I can't select any other character to play anymore. The only exception to this is King Dedede, Luigi, Ness, Kirby, and Bowser, because again of some more story reasons. So what you're supposed to do is then collect the rest of the characters' trophies in the subspace levels. This will then bring them back to life and you can play as them again. However, for the sake of this run, I am classifying all these trophies as items. And these technically aren't mandatory items in order to get to beat the game, so according to my rule set, I can't get any of these trophies since I banned picking up items. Which means basically these characters are gonna remain dead forever. But more importantly, it means that I can't use them to benefit me for the rest of the run. I can only use these 5 characters that I mentioned before. Plus Sonic does come in at the end, so I get 6 for the final boss, but only 5 for the Great Maze. But still, like I said, the Great Maze isn't that much more challenging, even with only these characters to use. The biggest weakness of this team is pretty well their lack of kill moves, which is going to be challenging for the final boss, and in all these character fights for the Great Maze. But luckily, Bowser and Luigi came in clutch for these bits, and the Great Maze was completed, allowing me to finally move on to the final boss, Taboo. Let's do this. Now. This is the real difficult part in the run. The final boss, Taboo, with only using these 6 characters and only using their B moves on intense difficulty. And this guy looked absolutely impossible to defeat under these conditions. First of all, he was so powerful. His attacks were by far the strongest out of any boss. So literally, in most cases, he had to hit me only 1 or 2 times for me to lose a stock. Seriously, I would just die outright that quickly, or I would be put so far away from the stage that I couldn't make it back without jumping. Shielding was also not an option at all here too, as I swear every single one of his moves instantly breaks my shield at this difficulty. So dodging is the only option. When I was able to dodge, that is, because so many times the only way to avoid his moves was to use my up B. But in some cases, the startup of my up Bs were so slow that I didn't even have time for the move to come out at all. Like look here, I couldn't avoid his attack fast enough, plus he used one of his instant kill moves on me. Oh yeah, did I also mention that he has a handful of moves that just instantly kill you outright at any percentage and at any part of the stage if you get caught in them? Yeah, those were fun to have to dodge too. I attempted this boss so many times, and literally I could not even get him past half health. He was too powerful, and my moves were simply too weak. Plus, he's the only boss that floats at this height, making a lot of my character's moves not even able to hit him, so I mostly had to use up Bs for any sort of damage. This fight truly looked like the end of this run. But come on guys, you know how these challenges go. We do not give up that easily, especially on the very last obstacle to overcome. There must be something I'm missing. There's gotta be a solution for this boss fight. Yes, that was it. Sonic the Hedgehog, of all things, was the key to winning this fight. While he still doesn't do that much damage, his neutral B homes in on Taboo, which made it a lot easier to get a hit in. Plus, I could use it over and over again, which allowed me to stay in the air and avoid a lot of his moves this way. And Sonic has a super fast up B, as well as just being fast in general, so he was very good at dodging moves too. However, while this was the best way of making progress, it still wasn't a walk in the park. There were still moves that were completely unreactable for me that were instant deaths, but I had to memorize what I could for all of his attack patterns. Then in this attempt here, I got Taboo to just over a third in health by mostly Sonic, but then I died, but still had 3 lives to work with. Then my dodging skills were put to the test when playing as Kirby. I had to spot dodge and roll at the perfect time to avoid all his insta-kill moves. The timing was very precise for these things, and things were getting a lot more nerve-wracking as I've never gotten his health this low. After whittling a lot of his health down as Kirby, I finally got hit, and Bowser was next. Bowser hit like a truck, but he was also a big target, so while I did a lot of damage here, Taboo killed me, which put me to my last stock. This was Luigi. I fell right off the start platform. I did one more spinny move which landed and hit Taboo, and he was finally down. There you have it. Taboo was defeated, the credits roll, and that is what I call challenge complete. So there we go. The very first Smash Brothers challenge on this channel has been completed. And this time, this challenge actually kind of sucked doing it, if I'm gonna be quite frank with you guys. The Subspace Emissary is honestly a lot more rough around the edges than I remember. But anyways, for the next challenge, it's gonna be a lot more enjoyable than this one, and I will need a Switch for it as well. So I'll see you guys next time.